something that I've been trying to look into is how to kind of integrate open source into the product development workflow. There are debates about like, should there be people, assigned to open source to work on a project 100%? Is that a good thing or not? Very often, if there are people in the company who do that, they are kind of separated from the product development workflow. So there isn't enough influence between like what's happening in open source and what's happening with the product. And with that disconnect, like showing the value in open source and the value of having that person contributing 100% is really, really hard. And like my prior experience in this area is just the constant clash of why things need to happen in a certain way, and how you're building up your trust and persona, and why the review is important, why we have to care about community building, community culture, and why that's valuable to any corporate organization. On the product development side, there are deadlines, there are the customer demands. I keep wondering how to reach the people on the product development side who are not the developers, because I think a lot of things break on the management level. Because managers have less access to communities. They will not be the people who go and review code and understand those dynamics. They also get the sales and customer pressure. And because of probably not having the understanding of open source, like they keep putting pressure on developers. I haven't been able to crack this nut yet in terms of how to find a way to have open source, the workflows and methods and values integrated into product development.
It's a tough problem, and there isn't one right answer, and that's part of what makes it so hard. Like, for every project, for every company, for every individual, and even like the kind of project and how that project is incorporated in your, there's a difference between like a compiler versus an infrastructure management platform versus a little JavaScript library versus like the nature of the code itself and how that code is being used actually affects how you want that to play out. I will say, as an engineer, I prefer the simplicity of just working 100% upstream. Having managed teams of people who are working 100% upstream, I enthusiastically supported them in doing that and had a constant fight with upper management to keep protecting them to do that. And also experienced resentment of other teams who weren't given that freedom. Like, they resented the fact that one team was 100% upstream, but they had to work on product all the time. So I think that having a person like Linus Torvalds or Greg KH work 100% upstream totally works. I think managing a team of 50 people that work 100% upstream when they're just like doing necessary work of code reviews and stuff, I don't know if that does work in the long term. Partly because of what you mentioned in terms of it's hard to sell the value when it's just this team of doing things in the community. The company doesn't really understand what they do or why they do it or what. As a manager, I have to admit, as much as an engineer, I would prefer to work 100% upstream. I think it is actually better to have people splitting their time. And that is hard as an engineer because you always end up with, these are the product deadlines, this is the thing, this is, the community's doing a release, how do I balance these two things? So it is all about balance. And that is actually the fundamental truth. And the balance is not the same for anyone. It is different for everyone. But you see repeated patterns. You see repeated patterns of, it really helps if your manager understands that it is important for you to be doing upstream work too. it really helps if they can actually see the connection between fixing bugs upstream or reviewing code upstream, and how that makes the code better by the time they actually get it. Instead of like waiting until the company's trying to do a release and like suddenly they have this big thud of a new version from upstream and it's terrible and it's got all these problems, they have to fix it. It is actually much more efficient and cost effective if they were engaged all along the way. I would say blurring the lines or thinning the boundaries between product and upstream really helps there. Whatever you can do, and it will be different for every company because every company tracks things differently, but whatever you can do to increase the visibility of that upstream life cycle, that upstream workflow, to make it visible within whatever company structure, whatever management structure they have, whatever milestones they track, whatever ticketing system they follow, whatever, like whatever their internal, whatever their inner source workflow is, kind of anything you can do to help make that more hybrid, so that so it's not like, oh, there's this open source project over here and there's company work over here and they're completely different and they have no connection. The more you can do to help make it part of that fundamental day-to-day workflow, it will help. Recognize that someone fixed a major bug upstream. Give that as much praise as someone who fixed a major bug before you ship to production. Before you, like when you were working on the upstream release, before you ship, like give it as much praise, give it as much recognition. Talk about what's happening upstream in your regular development efforts. And talk about it up the chain too. That was one of the things I did at Hewlett Packard was I would talk with all the developers, whether they were my team or any other team in the company who was working on open source, and kind of condense down, okay, this release is upcoming and this is what matters in this release, this is what we're working on, this is what we're contributing to, this is what we're concerned about, this is what the impact is going to be on our customers, and kind of like condensing that down in a more executive tone so that it was visible to them too.
Yeah, I mean, to reflect on that, like even from engineering perspective, like when I was working more on code, I think I was a team lead at the time, like a scrum master or something like that. And I was mostly working on code and making sure that the team, we all are on path from product perspective. And most of my time went into open source. 80% went into community and 20% went into understanding the product priorities and making sure that the team was on track because they were still on product at that time. And so I can't say that I was doing programming in both open source and product at the same time because there's only 24 hours in a day. However, I considered myself more of a developer at that time, and I did like not being 100% on the open source project, because if you get introduced to a project through your day job, and that's like where the original idea comes from, to look into that project. I liked being able to see the big picture and just have that product motivation in the background and understanding the customer and the sales needs. To me personally, it really helped like staying on track and have like one type of sort of motivation and guidance in terms of what to do in that project. Because again, the idea of looking into the project in the first place wasn't mine. So I wanted to keep embracing that origin of what I'm doing in this community in the first place. And then obviously, as you get more and more into the community, then you understand the priorities there, and you're able to push back on the product side too, that like, we can't do this here right now, or this bug has to be fixed because it is going to be an issue for us too when we are getting to this and that release, and so forth and so forth. And and trying to make the people on the product side understand how contributing back actually does reduce maintenance cost. It does, a lot of things for you once you get into it.